Hey there friends, David Lightbringer here, and it's time to talk about how to claim your dragon. Taming your dragon is right out, apparently, in Westeros, so you have to hope for claiming. When you play the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die, famously, and it's apparently much the same with trying to claim a dragon. Now maybe it's because I've been watching a lot of nature docs lately, but what I thought of is the male praying mantis trying to court the always larger female. It seems like she either likes the cut of your jib or she eats you, with very little in between. Which means that Steffon Darklyn wasn't a secret Targaryen. He was a male praying mantis with not enough riz. And by the way, let's all laugh at Ryan's joke, which he's obviously very proud of.
Ser Steffon Darklyn, who becomes Ser Steffon Sparklyn.
Now, in all seriousness, this is kind of the fire and blood moment in Season 2 that a lot of us A Song of Ice and Fire book fans have been waiting for. The sowing of the seeds, the dragon seeds. It's often talked about as one event, but actually seems to happen over a period of days or weeks in Fire and Blood, and apparently on the show as well. And now, Steffon Sparklyn has apparently become the brave sacrifice to kick off the festivities. We should actually give credit to Seasmoke, though, as he's been trying to get Addam's attention all season. Seasmoke must have thought Addam was playing hard to get. That's why Seasmoke had to clamp down and say, "Look, this is meant to be. Stop running from your feelings. They tried to match me with some Darklyn. Can you believe that? A Darklyn." That's right, House of the Dragon suddenly became a Pepe Le Pew cartoon, for those of you who know what that is, and somehow it worked. What was really funny is how both Hull brothers, Addam and Alan, got promoted against their will.
Is this an order or a request? I will expect you to report for your duties on the morrow.
But the serious point is that, yes, according to book canon, we all know that a dragon is not a slave, and that the mystery of the dragon bond pairing definitely involves a choice by the dragon to either accept or reject a potential rider. House of the Dragon took that one step further and asked the question, does a dragon get lonely without a rider? And if a dragon can choose, yes or no, to a new potential rider, might not a lonely dragon seek out a rider of their own choosing? I loved it myself, and I think it makes perfect sense. As I discussed in my Dreams Come From Dragons video last week, thanks everyone for watching, there is good reason to believe that the dragons are psychic, and that the prophetic Targaryen dragon dreams are being sent to the Targaryens by their dragons, and even by their dragon's eggs, which seemingly already contain active dragon spirits based on Dany's experiences in Game of Thrones and other evidence. If the dragons do have any amount of future sight, then it stands to reason that they might sometimes have a mystical sensing of who their next rider should be, as Seasmoke does with Addam. For all we know, all those occasions of Targaryens sneaking down to the dragon pit to claim their dragon without permission, which seems to be the way it's done, honestly, could have been spurred on by dreams that those dragons sent to their future riders. Now, I'm speculating here, obviously, but it's simply not going to be recorded in Fire and Blood when Targaryens have dragon dreams. The Maesters simply aren't told about such things, even though we know Targaryens do often have such dreams. Theories about dreams aside, there is quite a lot to talk about regarding the inner workings of the dragon bond after this week's episode. So I'll be both discussing what the book canon seems to say about it, as well as what we're seeing on the show. And by the way, if you're specifically looking for a talk about Nettles and Sheepstealer, I made an entire video about the character of Nettles a few weeks ago and why she is important to the story and why potentially cutting her from the story or changing her arc to someone else would be a very big change. So if you want that whole discussion, then check out the Where's Nettles video. But I do have to say, whether or not Nettles turns up on the show at some point, I was certainly excited to see signs of Sheepstealer and his sheep-eating ways. Alright, so the first step in how to claim your dragon is possessing the blood of the dragon in your veins. You do have some of that, don't you? Oh, you're not sure? Well, let's hope. On the show, we see that Rhaenyra has done some digging on Ancestry.scroll, if you will, looking for people with distant Targaryen blood, which is how she found Ser Steffon Darklyn's grandmother's grandmother, the fictitious Arianna Targaryen. Well, I mean, all of these characters are fictional, of course, but Arianna Targaryen is not from the books, and there's actually not from the books. And there's actually no way a Targaryen princess could exist around that time that we wouldn't have heard of. She would have had to have been a daughter, sister, or aunt of one of the three conquerors, essentially, and we would have heard about that if she existed. However, that's really not important for the show. It's just a minor quibble because the concept is right. If Rhaenyra wants to find riders for those unclaimed dragons, and remember there's 6, 3 of them are wild, who are the Cannibal, Sheep Stealer, and Grey Ghost. And then there is Vermithor, Silverwing, and Seasmoke, who have had riders before. If she wants to find riders for any of those dragons, then potentially anyone with even a drop of Targaryen blood, or Valyrian blood, you might say, could potentially be accepted by the dragons. One has to feel for Ser Steffon, though, who gives us his best, "Why exactly am I the only one standing at this meeting?" look. And then there's the Daemon Targaryen, help us? Well, that remains to be seen. Look, that Rhaenyra flashes. And honestly, this was an episode full of reaction GIF memes, including Seasmoke's reaction to Ser Steffon trying out the Dohaeris serve me command on Seasmoke. Now, back when I worked at Guitar Center with my manager, Maynard James Plum, this was known as the just smelled shit look, and it's the one some customers got when you informed them that no, you can't massively discount that custom shop fender that they want so bad but don't want to pay for. Seasmoke is all, "Dohaeris? What? You? Me? Dohaeris? Oh, you think so?" Actually, even better was Seasmoke's coy, yes, totally, go ahead and climb on my back. It's totally safe and not dangerous at all. Psych. Honestly, they should have known better than to sing that Valyrian hymn for Seasmoke, which, by the way, was the same song that Daemon sang to Vermithor last week that explains the mystery of the 3-headed dragon bond. And check out the Daemon's song video or the Targaryen Tapestry explained video for that breakdown. But yes, Seasmoke hates that song, it turns out. That song was big during Vermithor's day, but Seasmoke is Gen X, and he hates that stuff. No drums. How can you even dance to it? Who ever heard of a Dance of the Dragons with no drums? Get it out of my sight! Of course, in all seriousness, and I know I'm saying that a lot today, but House of the Dragon is a funny show. If you don't find it funny, I don't know what to tell you. This song does seem to be a part of the ritual of preparing a dragon for a new dragon bond. And the somber way that the Dragon Keepers sing the Valyrian hymn certainly does add a palpably sacred ambiance to the scene, as does the setting of the huge cavern. It reminded me of a forbidden religious ceremony held underground, or perhaps of the most ancient and archaic human rituals, which seem to have begun in caves adorned with red ochre shamanic cave paintings that danced in the light of torches extinguished some 40,000 years ago. See, I told you I can be serious. Some of the Team Black scenes have been lacking in intensity this season, but this certainly wasn't one of them. Rhaenyra's face tells the story in 3 reaction gifs, actually. This first one is the OMG, this might just work, slow head nod. This second one I call oh god, this is all going horribly wrong. And this third one I call the what have I done / disassociating in real time look. Or maybe it's just the look you get when you realize that the Dragon Keepers keep suicide knives handy so they don't have to experience fully burning to death. And by the way, do check out the behind the scenes on the filming of that scene. The stunt guy who did this was actually lit on fire in a flame retardant suit that left him unable to see, because you have to cover your eyes for safety. And while he was on fire wearing that suit, he was also pretending to end his life with the prop knife, with a full blood hose and everything. Did it all at the same time, and that's pretty incredible stuff, so check that out. And I was also reflecting while watching this scene how the life of a Dragon Keeper must be inherently religious in nature. And we've also been hearing a lot of talk in the last 2 episodes about how the dragons are viewed as gods by many people. Now, in the Dreams Come From Dragons video, I actually speculated that the Valyrian gods were their dragons, which may contain the spirits of their ancestors. So there's a lot of dragon deification going on. And you know, the Dragon Keepers spend their entire lives around the dragons, often suffering minor burns, and obviously are prepared to die at basically any time. So there's no way that such people wouldn't have a religious view of the dragons and the sacred arts they employ to manage them, such as ancient Valyrian sorceress hymns, as well as the proverbial 10-foot pole, which does not look nearly long enough. And note to Ser Steffon, calling the dragons gods is a smart move in your position. However, your faith betrayed you when you uttered, that's the wrong god and the wrong religion, my friend. And shout out to King Aegon, who, when he saw his brother coming on Vhagar, said, "Thank the gods!" Plural, which also alludes to the gods of the Seven. So yeah, wrong religion, buddy. Now, the mystique of the Valyrians and the Targaryens as godlike people who are set above everyone else is part propaganda, obviously, and functions as propaganda in the story. However, it's also based on a very real difference between the Valyrians and everyone else, which is lizard DNA. So the blood of the dragon, quote unquote, is not just an expression, but a specific reference to the fact that the Targaryens literally have draconic DNA in their bloodstream, as evidenced by their occasional malformed lizard babies, which have various physical features of dragons and worms. On the show, Rhaenyra is speculating that a more distant Targaryen kin might have thinner Valyrian blood and therefore might be less likely to be able to bond with a dragon. But we honestly do not know if that concept is correct or not. I tend to think it's more a matter of simply having some amount of magical dragon blood more than how much you have. But of course, the Targaryens do in general seem concerned with maintaining the highest possible concentration of Valyrian blood, hence the incest, and hence the many marriages to House Velaryon who have Valyrian blood as well. Now, these practices could be because their Valyrian looks are generally associated with their perceived supremacy. And we see that dynamic at play, for example, in The Hedge Knight with Baelor Breakspear, who's just as Targaryen as his brother Maekar, but doesn't look it and so is perceived as Dornish or too Dornish. So yeah, the emphasis on maintaining Valyrian looks in House Targaryen, it could be because of that perceived supremacy. However, we are also led to believe that the Targaryens at least think that it helps them maintain their ability to bond with dragons, and that may well be the case. Now, there are rumors that the show might be about to depict someone who does not have any Valyrian blood claiming a dragon. And if they do that, they'll be wrong. Don't turn off the video. I'm joking when I use that tone of voice. All I mean is that they would be changing the book canon, which is, of course, fine in the sense that the showrunner's priority should be making the best TV show that they can and not sticking to the A Song of Ice and Fire book lore for brownie points from us book fans. However, I do want to be very clear that according to everything we are presented with in the books, it does seem that non-Valyrians cannot form a magical, quote-unquote, dragon bond without the aid of something like Euron's Valyrian dragonbinder horn, which may have the capability to control dragons in some unknown way, or perhaps even to engineer a brand new line of dragon-blooded people. But that's all theoretical and neither here nor there, because we're not really talking about dragonbinder horns. What we're talking about is lizard people. And my main argument here is that the entire point of George showing us that the Targaryens sometimes do pop out lizard babies is to help us understand why they and their Valyrian ancestors are the only people to ever magically bond with dragons in the history of the known world, save for the possibility of the ancestors of the Valyrians themselves from the Great Empire of the Dawn, but that too is a story for another day as their civilization vanished in the chaos of the Long Night. In other words, I would make the case that it is no accident that only Valyrian people can bond with dragons. The draconic DNA in their veins seemingly enables them to share a kinship with the dragons that normal humans cannot. Or else, what's the point? What's the point of creating the Empire of Valyria and making them lizard people just to be like, well, you don't actually need to be lizard people. They did that all just for fun because they like to dragons. I don't think that's it. Now, we do know that it's not really about the looks, just the dragon blood. For example, all of Rhaenyra's sons with Harwin Strong ride dragons, and none of them, that's right, Harwin, Laenor's not the father, it's Harwin, and none of them have these signature silver hair. And in the books where purple eyes are a signature Valyrian trait, none of them have purple eyes either. The character of Nettles in Fire and Blood is, in my mind, specifically an exploration on this topic, or you might say a further exploration of this topic in complement to Rhaenyra's strong sons. And what we're talking about here is how a person is viewed when they don't look Valyrian but can claim a dragon. So Nettles' dragon blood is doubted by many people in the story and by the Maesters, where Rhaenyra's son's blood is not, largely because Nettles is low-born and of uncertain parentage, whereas Rhaenyra's sons are high-born, they're Rhaenyra's children. And Nettles, to be specific, is literally said to be a homeless girl from the streets whose mother was said to be a dockside sex worker. We don't use the W word here, but you know what I mean. I don't think the dockside brothels are known for being the best ones, so everything about Nettles is low-born. We get the point, I guess. Another key detail from Fire and Blood is that Nettles uses sheep to befriend the wild dragon known as Sheep Stealer by bringing him a freshly slaughtered sheep every day to make friends with the dragon before attempting a ride. Some people have taken this to mean that Nettles didn't do the normal dragon bond process and doesn't have Valyrian blood, but I'll point out that Nettles is the only person in recorded history to ever tame a wild dragon. The only one. Everyone else who tried got eaten or roasted. And Fire and Blood also tells us that not even the Dragon Keepers of Dragonstone could ever get any sort of control over Sheepstealer or Cannibal or Grey Ghost. Thus, it seems like Nettles was just smart. Smarter than Steffon Darklyn anyway, or the people who put him up to it also, and that Nettles simply used food to greatly improve her chances of being accepted by the dragon. Because again, we know that just having the blood isn't enough. Now, one of the ways I think we can be certain that Nettles did actually form a full magic dragon bond with her dragon, as opposed to just making friends with it and riding on its back, is that she successfully flew Sheepstealer into battle, and I don't think that's something you could do without a magical dragon bond. The dragon bond clearly enables a psychic link between dragon and rider, and that seems to be how Daemon and Caraxes are operating in tandem in the Stepstones. Daemon's not even using verbal commands there, so I think the verbal commands that the dragon riders sometimes use are really just cues, or ways of giving a specific instruction, while the psychic link shared between rider and dragon is really how the dragons and riders operate on the same page. So for example, if someone like Nettles wasn't magically bonded to a dragon, but had made friends with it and could sit on its back, well, if they wanted to fly into battle, how would you even get the dragon to fly where you want, or attack only the enemy's troops? You'd basically just be hanging on while the dragon does whatever it wants, and that's not at all what we see when the dragons go to battle. The dragons and riders operate in close concert with the same objectives, and they also share each other's pain, as we see with Daemon and Caraxes. Thus, I think that Nettles riding Sheepstealer into battle is further proof that she is the blood of the dragon, that she did form a magical dragon bond with Sheepstealer, and thus that you do in fact need the magical blood to bond a dragon. Now, some people, understandably, are attracted to the idea that the Targaryen supremacy doctrine is just bullshit. Because, of course, in the real world, there are no godlike humans or lizard people, and the idea of total human equality is obviously a widely held tenet of the modern world, which is a good thing, again, obviously. However, what George is doing with the Valyrians is something of a different thought experiment. He's asking the question, what would it be like if those people did exist? What would a group of human beings do if they alone had the ability to ride dragons? Even without such abilities, certain groups or races or cultures of people in human history obviously do gain a supremacist philosophy and believe that they are better than everyone. That does happen all around the world. So yeah, he's asking the question, what would happen in a fantasy world if there was a race of people that have a magical ability, which is a trope that we often see? He's trying to ask the question, as he always does with his use of fantasy tropes, what would this actually look like? And he's saying that eventually something as awful as Valyria might emerge. Then George continues that thought experiment with House Targaryen by asking the question, what if some of those lizard people endowed with special godlike powers tried to be better people? Because, of course, the Targaryens left behind most of the worst Valyrian practices when they moved to Dragonstone. So at this point, the power of the dragon bond simply becomes an analogy for the use of any kind of power, which is, in my opinion, the major theme and point of commentary of A Song of Ice and Fire. Dany and Jon specifically have to deal with the dilemma of inheriting this ill-gotten power, which came down to them because of the great evils of the Valyrian freehold. Or said another way, they've got to try to find a better and more noble use for this power than setting themselves up as kings and emperors. Now, it should be said that George also does deal with the propaganda aspect of all of this, because apart from the magical lizard DNA lurking in their veins, the Valyrians are just like everyone else, quote-unquote, meaning that they're not any more wise or noble or intelligent, and they're not even stronger or physically superior like, say, fantasy elves are. They don't have heightened senses or super speed or anything like that. So they essentially operate in the story as regular people who have been given a special power. And the commentary comes in how they use it, in how they are viewed, in how they build up a doctrine of exceptionalism around that dragon blood, and how some of them try to use that to establish a kind of superiority, or you might say as a license to do whatever they want. Prince Jacaerys put his finger on that in episode 5, when he drew a distinction between noble-born Targaryens and, essentially, just anyone with Targaryen blood, which brings in the interesting class angle to all of this. When someone of humble birth, such as Nettles or any other dragon seed of uncertain and lowly parentage, claims a dragon, it kind of strips away all the other exceptionalist ideas that have been built up around the ability to bond with dragons. So it's not the hair or the fancy clothes or the impeccability of their lineage or the red keep. It's just a drop of dragon blood and the will of the dragon who chooses to either accept or reject you. That's how I see it anyway, but of course, let me know in the comments if you think there's an angle that I'm missing or if you have a different take on the blood of the dragon thing. So speaking of whether or not the dragon chooses to accept you, let's talk about how not to claim a dragon. Don't show any fear, the Dragon Keeper lady says to Ser Steffon. But that's easier said than done, and in the end I think we can say that Ser Steffon showed quite a lot of fear. As one would. I felt like House of the Dragon did a great job of capturing the courage that it would take to step forward to the end of that plinth, past the jaws of the dragon and climb into that saddle, and yeah. Steffon does get praise for not screaming like Ned Flanders and running away, and so does Quentin Martell, for that matter. But I just don't think that timid is the emotional quality that dragons are looking for in a rider. So perhaps if Ser Steffon had strode confidently up to Seasmoke, as Rhaenyra does with her dragon Syrax, he might have pulled it off. Or maybe he just would have been dead a few seconds sooner. It's hard to say. It was definitely a mistake to strike the "We are the champions" face before actually getting on Seasmoke's back. That's called counting your chickens before they come home to roast. Ba-boom-tsh. Steffon Darklyn. So in the end, Seasmoke's favorite song turns out not to be Winged Leader, Fire Breather, but instead, 90s hip-hop one-hit wonder Positive K's I Got a Man. That's right, it could be that Ser Steffon never even had a chance, because Seasmoke had already promised their heart to another. As I said, Seasmoke has been sniffing around Addam of Hull since episode 1, and finally got down to business with Addam after they tried to stick a Darklyn on his back. Now, many people have asked how Addam can bond with a dragon if he's the bastard son of Corlys and not descended from his wife Rhaenys Targaryen. And I'm here to say that there are 3 possible answers. The first answer is that the Velaryons actually all have Targaryen blood, because the members of House Targaryen and Velaryon intermarried for generations, going back even to the 100 years before the conquest. For example, the mother of the conquerors was Valenna Velaryon, and she herself was half Targaryen on her mother's side, which means that her mother was a Targaryen who married a Velaryon man, who married into House Velaryon and brought the Targaryen blood into the house. If that's the source of Addam's dragon blood, then it would basically be as thin as Ser Steffon's is by way of his great-great-grandma. But there's also the possibility that Targaryen-blooded people have married into House Velaryon more recently, because we don't have the entire Velaryon family tree, and it's kind of suggested that other Targaryens might have married into Velaryon before the conquest, which would simply increase the general amount of Targaryen blood in the Velaryon bloodline. The second option is that Addam's mother, whose name is Merilda of Hull in the books, was herself a dragon seed with some amount of Targaryen blood. Some people have wondered if perhaps Corlys has a type, so to speak. Sorry if that's offensive, but in the books, I will say that there really are no clues that Merilda is Valyrian. And then the third option, it could be that although the Velaryons were never in possession of dragons when in Valyria, they might still possess the latent ability to bond with dragons, should the opportunity arise. So, said another way, it could be, and is likely the case in my opinion, that all Valyrian people have dragon blood, have the lizard DNA, even though only some houses actually possessed dragons. This is probably the simplest answer to how Addam bonded Seasmoke, although I think the first option works pretty well also. Another popular question regarding Addam and Seasmoke is of course the issue of Laenor, Seasmoke's first rider and Addam's half-brother. As I predicted in my great wisdom, no, I'm kidding, I talked about all the possibilities. We're not gonna get really some complicated explanation of how Laenor was able to release his bond with Seasmoke, which I do think could be theoretically possible, but we're probably never really gonna get into that on the show, and all we know as of right now is that Seasmoke
has grown restless of late. I cannot know why.
That probably means that the show is trying to tell us that Laenor has died off-screen. And in fact, what I think the show is doing is giving the viewer the same perspective that the people on Dragonstone have. So for example, all Rhaenyra knows is that Seasmoke is suddenly restless of late, and probably in a couple weeks, she'll get a letter about how Laenor has died. And then we'll find out along with her. This is just not something they were ever going to spend a lot of time on when they have so many things to cover. So again, the main point for the show going forward is that Seasmoke was available to be bonded with and apparently has chosen Addam. So did Seasmoke choose Addam because he's so closely related to Laenor? That's certainly an obvious question to ask, and I do have a theory about the dragons being bonded to specific family lines. I think there may be some sort of blood magic ritual thing where an ancestor Valyrian is sacrificed and spirit stuffed into the dragon, with the descendants of that person and that dragon then sharing a spirit affinity for one another, with that being part of what enables the dragon bond to form. Seasmoke passing from Laenor to Addam has therefore always intrigued me. Perhaps there's some sort of familiarity or affinity for someone as close as possible to a dragon's previous rider. Again, I'll say that I talked about this more in the Daemon Song video and the Tapestry Explained video if you're curious, but the long and short of it is that there is some reason to think that Seasmoke might have picked Addam because he is Corlys' son, as Laenor was. And then the last thing that I want to touch on is the idea of the character of the rider potentially having something to do with the dragon's choice to accept or reject them. I don't want to go too far with this. I mean, poor Rhaena was apparently rejected off-screen by every dragon in Dragonstone. That's what they made it sound like. They're like, oh, the dragons here don't want anything to do with her.
She has attempted it, alas, but the dragons here would not take her as a rider.
So I don't mean this as any sort of slight against Rhaena. I'm just saying we did, see that Ser Steffon's fearful approach may not have been the best way to impress a dragon. And we also might wonder if Seasmoke might have been testing Addam to see how he responded to a few low flybys, to see how quick his reflexes are. And yes, Addam did run, which, to be honest, is really the only sane thing to do when a dragon is strafing you. But one might observe that Addam ran really fast. And then he did some parkour-like moves, scrambling through the woods. I think I saw a Roger Craig high step in there somewhere. So perhaps Seasmoke likes a hyper-athletic rider and was giving Addam a little trial run. We should also give the actor Clinton Liberty some major props here because he performed all of these stunts himself. And on the behind the scenes, everyone was kind of marveling at his athleticism and willingness to throw himself into what amounts to a pretty challenging obstacle course. So do check that out because it's pretty cool. Anytime an actor is capable of pulling off their own stunts, it allows the filmmakers to be more creative and flexible with how they film the scene because they don't have to hide the face of the stunt double. That's a large part of what made this scene so thrilling and immersive. So big thanks and credit to Clinton, and I think everyone, really loved the personality of Seasmoke that came through. I mean, earlier I mentioned Pepe Le Pew, and people younger than myself brought up Shrek. So yeah, it was a great scene. I think everyone loved it. And I also really liked Seasmoke's unique call, which was a little more shrieking than other dragon calls. And by the way, Cleo, my bird, reacted pretty strongly to it when I was watching the episode. I think her ancient dinosaur DNA was hearing pterodactyl in that call, maybe. Blood calls to blood, after all. Dino DNA. Now, in terms of dragons testing their riders, we also saw Vhagar testing young Aemond when he attempted to claim her, if you recall. First, Vhagar brewed up some fire in her belly to see how fearful or courageous Aemond was, with him seemingly passing the test by keeping his cool and issuing a few firm Valyrian command words. Then Vhagar watched, intimidatingly, I think we could say, as Aemond climbed that cargo net. I mean, try to imagine how nervous you would be. And then as soon as Vhagar took off, she went through some of her most intense flight maneuvers. The vertical takeoff, the dive bomb swoop, flying through a flock of birds at high speed. So yeah, when I watched the scene back a second time, it really did seem that Nana Vhagar was putting Aemond through the ringer to see if he really could handle all that dragon. We might be able to imagine a similar first flight for Addam and Seasmoke, given Seasmoke's overly exuberant personality, shall we say. Also a bit of a tricksy dragon. Sure, go ahead, climb on, it's safe. Psych. And then finally, when we talk about dragons and their riders testing each other, we might also think, of course, of Daenerys claiming Drogon in Daznak's pit. Daenerys, whose perspective we're inside, certainly seemed to believe that Drogon might eat her if she showed any fear or hesitation, even though her and Drogon have obviously been growing up together for 3 years, with Daenerys in the end successfully being able to assert dominance over Drogon with her whip and fearlessness. Quentyn saw this and later tried to follow this example and might have even succeeded, I'd like to point out, but made the mistake of trying to claim a dragon when there was a bloody brawl going on in the hallway with one of those people even attacking the dragon, and B, more importantly, while there was a second dragon behind him. So those are far from ideal circumstances, I think we can say. But it was really the second dragon that did him in. I mean, Daznak's pit was also chaotic and full of bloodshed, yet Daenerys was able to command Drogon with her will. Anyway, I think that'll do it for now, guys. If I have time, I'm going to try to squeeze out a serial killer Aemond video this weekend, because yikes. But who knows if I'll have time for that, and I will definitely be seeing you on Sunday after the new episode, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and then pop on over for the aftermath to give your take, hash things out with me, Nettles, and Tim. Cheers, guys, and I'll see you on Sunday.